The sycamore tree, ancient and gnarled, cast a long shadow over Maple Street. Beneath its sprawling canopy, children played, lovers strolled, and neighbors exchanged greetings. But lately, a different sound reached those who lived on Maple Street, a sound that clashed with the lazy hum of cicadas and the laughter of children. It was the sound of raised voices, sharp and discordant, emanating from the house with the peeling blue paint. This was Ruckus's house. Ruckus, a brindle pit bull with soulful eyes and a heart as big as his bark, was a fixture on Maple Street. He belonged to the Miller family, newcomers who had moved in just a year ago. The family consisted of Mark, a burly man with a quick temper, Lisa, his weary wife, and their 10-year-old son, Ethan. At first, the Millers seemed like any other family, their laughter blending seamlessly with the symphony of suburban life. But as the weeks turned into months, the laughter faded, replaced by the unsettling soundtrack of a family teetering on the brink. Ruckus, always attuned to the emotions of his humans, grew increasingly anxious. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a broken window. It happened on a Tuesday, the day after Mark lost his job at the factory. The shattering glass, sharp and sudden, sliced through the afternoon stillness like a shard of ice. Neighbors peered from behind curtains, their faces etched with concern. Ruckus, cowering beneath the sycamore tree, whimpered softly. The sound was primal, a guttural expression of fear that resonated with an ancient understanding of the violence humans were capable of inflicting. From then on, the rumbles became a recurring nightmare. They started with raised voices, escalating into a cacophony of slamming doors and crashing objects. Each outburst left Ruckus trembling, his usually bright eyes clouded with fear. He would retreat to the farthest corner of the backyard, seeking solace in the cool earth beneath the old oak tree. But there was no escaping the turmoil that had become the soundtrack to his life. Maple Street had always prided itself on being a place where neighbors looked out for each other. It was a community where children roamed freely, their laughter echoing through the streets, and where front porches transformed into stages for impromptu gatherings on warm summer nights. The Millers' arrival had initially been met with open arms and welcoming smiles, but as the rumbles grew louder and more frequent, a palpable tension settled over the neighborhood. The women of Maple Street, their voices hushed yet resolute, gathered over backyard fences and clotheslines, their words carried on the gentle breeze. They spoke of the Millers with a mixture of pity and disapproval, their maternal instincts torn between wanting to help and fearing the unknown. Some advocated for calling the authorities, their voices laced with urgency. Ethan, a wisp of a boy with his mother's sad eyes and his father's unruly brown hair, became a ghost haunting the fringes of Maple Street. Gone were the days when he would race his bicycle down the sidewalk, his laughter echoing in his wake. Now he kept to himself, his small frame dwarfed by the weight of his family's troubles. His once bright eyes, now dulled with a weariness that belied his tender years, reflected the turmoil that had become his reality. Ruckus, his constant companion, seemed to sense Ethan's pain. He would follow the boy like a shadow, his presence a silent testament to their shared burden. They would spend hours beneath the sycamore tree, Ethan confiding his fears and anxieties to the only creature who seemed to understand. Ruckus, in turn, would nuzzle his head against Ethan's chest, offering the unconditional love and support that had become absent in the boy's life. Ethan's 10th birthday arrived like an unwelcome guest, a stark reminder of the passage of time and the innocence that had been stolen from him. The day dawned bright and clear, the sun casting long shadows across Maple Street. But inside the Miller house, darkness lingered. The air hung heavy with the remnants of the previous night's argument, a bitter cocktail of anger, resentment, and despair. Mark, still reeling from the loss of his job and the erosion of his dreams, retreated further into himself, seeking solace at the bottom of a bottle. Lisa, her spirit crushed beneath the weight of her husband's anger and her own inability to fix their broken family, moved through the motions of life with a defeated resignation. Mark Miller hadn't always been the man he was now. his heart hardened by disappointment and his spirit broken by the weight of unfulfilled expectations. There had been a time, not so long ago, when he had been a different man, a man who believed in the promise of tomorrow and the enduring power of love. It was a time when his laughter had been genuine, his touch gentle, and his eyes filled with an optimism that had been as infectious as it was fleeting. Growing up, Mark had always been drawn to animals, their unwavering loyalty and unconditional love, a stark contrast to the complexities of human relationships. Ethan's small acts of kindness didn't go unnoticed. The neighbors, their hearts touched by the boy's quiet determination to care for his dog in the face of adversity, found ways to help, albeit discreetly. Bags of dog food mysteriously appeared on the Miller's porch, their presence announced by the gentle chime of wind chimes. Bowls of fresh water materialized next to Ruckus's dilapidated doghouse, a silent testament to the compassion that still flourished on Maple Street. One afternoon, Mrs. Peterson, an elderly widow known for her love of animals and her seemingly endless supply of homemade cookies, stopped by the Miller's house with a plate of freshly baked treats. Ethan, his guard up as always, eyed her with suspicion. "I made these for you, Ethan," Mrs. Peterson said, her voice as warm and comforting as a hand-knitted quilt. "And I brought some dog biscuits for Ruckus." The whispers started subtly, carried on the breeze that rustled the leaves of the sycamore tree and set the wind chimes tinkling. They were whispers of concern, of apprehension, of a growing unease that settled over Maple Street like a shroud. The neighbors, their lives intertwined by the unspoken bonds of community, found themselves drawn into the Miller's troubled orbit. Their own tranquility, disrupted by the echoes of discord that emanated from the house with the peeling blue paint. At first, the whispers were confined to hushed conversations over backyard fences, the words spoken in low tones, laced with a mixture of pity and judgment. The women of Maple Street, their maternal instincts heightened by the plight of young Ethan and his neglected dog, exchanged worried glances and shared their observations in hushed tones. "Did you hear them last night?" Mrs. Henderson, her face etched with concern, whispered to Mrs. Johnson as they hung laundry on the clothesline that separated their properties. "It sounded awful, like something breaking." The turning point came on a sweltering July evening. The air hung heavy, thick with humidity and the threat of an approaching storm. The usual sounds of children playing and lawnmowers humming were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness that seemed to amplify the tension that had gripped Maple Street. It began with a crash, loud and jarring, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Then came the shouting, angrier and more volatile than ever before. This time, however, there was a new sound, a high-pitched keening that sent chills down the spines of those who heard it. It was Ruckus, his bark laced with panic, as if he sensed the escalating danger. The sycamore tree, its leaves rustling in the aftermath of the storm, continued to stand sentinel over Maple Street. But the sounds that emanated from beneath its branches had changed. Gone were the rumbles of discord, replaced by the gentle murmur of healing and the quiet hum of hope. The air, once thick with tension, now carried the scent of freshly cut grass and the sweet aroma of Mrs. Peterson's apple pie cooling on a windowsill. The events of that stormy July night had shaken Maple Street to its core, forcing its residents to confront truths they had long tried to ignore. The Millers, once perceived as outsiders, became a shared responsibility, a reminder that even in the most idyllic of settings, darkness could lurk beneath the surface. But from the ashes of their collective pain, a renewed sense of community emerged, stronger and more resilient than ever before.